On
That's
record.
good. That's great.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
my name is Danny Weil, and
Is it on?
I'm an old friend of Carl's, and I'm engaged in this venture with Carl to try to capture a little bit of a biography and history. So I'm going to be asking Carl some questions, and we'll work forward. All right, Carl?
Yeah. That sounds good.
Okay, good.
All right.
And when the camera's back on you, you let me know when
It's
you're
back.
ready. Okay, good. All right, well, basically, Carl, yeah, I just have a lot of questions, and I really want to go back in time. So, we were discussing the last time I was here some of aspects of your life, and I'd like to go over them again. First of all, can you tell me where you were born and what year you were born in?
I was born in New York City, Manhattan, in 1933 in April.
And how long did you stay in New York before you
I
moved?
was we stayed in the general area. That means all the boroughs. We lived in all the boroughs, and we mostly lived in Manhattan. I remember because that was the last address. Our house burnt down.
Now, you were born during the Great Depression.
Yeah, born in 33.
33
Yeah.
was at the height of the Great Depression. There were 25% of the American people weren't working.
Right.
What was it like to grow up in the Depression in New York?
Well, my family were on the rich side because my mother was and father were real estate agents, but basically my father was a cook, but when he met my mother, she was very enterprising, a very enterprising person. My mother had dealings with the Nazi Party.
In what way?
She was a Bundist. Bundist were the secret society of Hitler in the United States.
Right, and there was a movement to get the Bundes out of the United States and to put them in prison.
Right.
Was your mother was your mother a devout Nazi?
Well, today she's a proud backer of Bush, so I would say she's still the same because I consider George Bush that kind of a person too.
Well, certainly he had dealings with his family had dealings with the Nazis back in the 40s. But going back to your life in New York, then, what was it like? Where did you play? In other words, when you were 7 years old, it was 1940, and the war was beginning to break out, but it hadn't really quite broken out.
Mm-hmm.
What was your life like at 7 years old? Did you play in the school grounds, or what did you do?
I remember large cars, nice houses, maids. I remember throwing a tomato at a black maid because probably because of racism in having a black maid and having my friends yelled for her to come out and throw a tomato at her was part of racism that the community I lived with.
Now, were your parents arriving immigrants, or did they?
My mother was an immigrant
From where?
from I think Genoa, Italy, and she was also a baroness. Now, she was a baroness, and I only found out late in my life that she was what's the country next? It's Italian and Sicilian. She was Sicilian, and her father was a Sicilian. So they probably had their place in Sicily, but when they started to move out and they come to the United States, they had a baronship. Now, baronship meant that he could sell it to somebody. So it took a lot of negotiations and several crossings back and forth to New York. But my grandfather ended up in the Bronx, and he knew Singer, the guy that owned Singer sewing machines, and he had a distributing firm for Singer. in
So,
the Bronx.
so your life during the Depression up until World War II was not a life of hardship.
Wasn't of hardship, and right as the war started, we moved to Ohio, and when we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, we lived in a nice house, nice surroundings, and my father had work putting in pipes in the new Wright plant. It was known as the Wright plant, which later on became GE.
And this is now what, 1941.
Yeah, around 1941, 42.
Mm-hmm. And your mother, she attended these meetings of the Nazi
I
Party?
think by then they were way underground and didn't talk about it anymore.
They didn't talk about it.
Because I just, by feeling, found this out, all this stuff out. Because my mother never told me any of this stuff, nor did she ever teach me Italian. She didn't teach me Italian because I would have known what she was talking about.
I see.
But
Did your father speak Italian?
Yeah, my father spoke Italian, and then I had a brother, a half brother, who was Irish. But he, my mother's favorite son was her second son. His name was Robert, and he lived there. And he went to high school there, and he went to Jesuit school, and later on went into the service. I'm talking about, he went into the Marines, and then he went into the Navy and became an ensign, and he was flying off of carriers at that time, and then he got a terrible disease and died.
Oh my goodness.
So, but that was my mother. She reveres him to this day. So does my sisters, both of them.
So how many siblings did you have?
Well, I had two older brothers, a sister, Jeanette, and a sister, Andrea, who lives in Berkeley, and then I had a brother. His name was John.
I see.
And I had very close coordinations with him in Hollywood, starting rock bands and stuff like that.
And he was how much older than you was he?
He was 11 years younger than I.
11 years younger. Is
Yeah.
he still alive now?
No, he died of a terrible disease. It had to do with, let me see, it was his jaw or his tongue, maybe. Tongue. He smoked too much pot. He smoked a high quality pot, and he smoked. And he was a guru. He was very closely associated with the Dalai Lama.
Oh, okay.
And he collected a lot of money for Dalai Lama. I know he did, because I went to one of those things in Hollywood that he was doing. He had a band of his own. The band was a kind of a weird band. There was gongs and stuff that came from Tibet.
Mm-hmm.
When he died, he had at least 3 or 4 columns in the San Francisco Chronicle.
Mm.
That's what they thought of him.
Mm-hmm. And what year did he die?
I think it was, well, what was it, 94 or somewhere like that.
Were you close with him?
I was close with him, but we always had a raging fight with each other. Example was when he had his ashram on Fairfax Avenue, right there by the museum.
Fairfax and where?
I forget the name of this cross street. Third.
Fairfax and Third.
Third.
Near
yeah.
the CBS building, where the CBS
No,
building.
no. Third and Fairfax.
Yeah,
No, you're right. You're right. It had to be, was it 6th and Fairfax? Where's the museum backside?
You mean you're talking about the La Brea Tar Pits?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the Miracle Mile.
You want to get that?
That's the Miracle Mile.
Hello? Yeah. I'm doing a thing right now. It's all right. No. I'm doing something right now, Robert. I'll talk to you later. No, later. I don't know, Robert. I'll have to call you back. All right, bye.
Yes, it's 6th Street. I know exactly where it
6th.
is. Yes. That's the
Actually, it wasn't 6th Street, but it was one block
east.
east.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, he had a place he picked out there, and I lost the thing about. Oh yeah. So he has a restaurant, and my thought was, he says, "You want to be the manager of the restaurant?" I said, "No. The way I usually do things is I'll be the dishwasher," because he already had a cook, right? So I think I worked 2 or 3 days as a dishwasher, and then his cook quit. So he said, I need a cook. You want to do it? I said, okay. So I'm cooking, and in the meantime, he had an accountant, so he made her the manager of the restaurant. She was adjoined in the building, so she could do that. She could actually, yeah. So he had her fire me as the cook, and my own brother. So that was kind of our thing. But we had rock and roll band. We had the band, a Fraternity of Man, which had a hit. Was "Don't Bogart the Joint." It's a famous.
Oh, it's a very famous song.
Famous song.
Sure.
And
you and he managed the band, or put the band together?
I put the band together. I picked out the musicians.
What year
for
was
it.
this?
That was 67, 68.
Okay. Well, let's go back in time a little bit now. When did you did graduate high school, didn't you?
No.
You didn't.
No, I lived in Reading, Ohio, and I went to the freshman high school.
Okay.
And decided that high school wasn't for me, and I just took off.
What did you do? You must have been, what, about 15, 16?
Yeah, I was 15, 16. I ran away from home at that time, went to Texas. And
how did you get to Texas?
We hitchhiked. I hitchhiked with another guy, and he didn't go all the way with me, and I ended up in jail in Dallas, Texas, because I didn't know what to. I was didn't have any food and didn't have. So a cop said, "I'm going to take you to jail," and he took me to jail. And 2 weeks later, I ended up on a bus going back to Cincinnati, Ohio.
How did you get back on the bus? How did you get the money?
I just got on a bus. My father, I think, or my mother. My father sent me money to get back.
I see.
My mother didn't want me to live with her. So I think I joined the Marines. I was in the Marines for 3 months and wouldn't do what they told me to do, so they threw me out.
Oh, so they actually dishonorably discharged you?
They undesirably
discharged
me.
And then you were, about 17 at the time?
I was 17 at the time.
So that put it into 1950. This was around the Korean War, wasn't it?
Yeah, and actually what happened to my platoon, and I was intuitive enough to understand that the platoon that I had were young guys. There was one Italian guy like myself, and they kicked him to another place, was Camp Lejeune, to become an officer. I was sent home, and the platoon went on to go to Korea. Mm-hmm. I ran into the guy D'Amato, I think his name was, in an airport or a bus station somewhere later on in my life, and he said to me, "Do you know what happened to our platoon in the Marines?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, they all went to Korea, and they were caught without their winter gear, and they all froze to death.
Jeez.
So that would have been my way of participating in the Korean War. So I was glad that they sent me out. The first thing they did when I walked in, came onto Paris, South Carolina, was the guy slapped me in the face for whatever and he says, "We're going to teach you how to kill people." So that was the awakening thing of being in the Marines, and I finagled my way out of the Marines. I finagled my way out, knowing that I didn't want to keep doing.
What type of things did you do to finagle your way out?
We were on the rifle range. We had to. You have to qualify to see what what your average is for shooting a rifle. So at the same time, they also put you on. They teach you how to swim or be a lifeguard. You have lifeguard training. Okay, so what I did was I was the guard for another platoon. They have what they call a fire watch guard. While they're swimming, somebody has to watch their clothes.
Right.
So I went in somebody's pocket, took $10 out of the pocket, went to the windowsill, folded the $10 bill up, and put it through a crack in the windowsill, and it was gone. Right. So after that, the guy must have complained, and they tore my locker box up. But they never accused me, because they couldn't accuse me. The $10 was gone. They looked at all my clothes and all that. Anyway, within a short time after that, they said, "You can go home."
Now then, the 1950s were starting at this time. So what did you do when you went home? Did you go to work? Did you?
I'm not sure what happened after that. This is I got married. That's what I did. I got married. Let me see. I'm 18 years old. I came back. There's a lull there, and I can't quite pick that up.
Did you? But you're thinking you got married at that time?
I got married. Yes, I did get married at 18, and then I know what happened to me. I went to prison.
Well, can you tell us the story beyond?
Well, the prison story was that I had a gang of guys. We were called the Green Jackets. We were Catholic boys with nothing to do. One guy had a Hearst, and he was an older guy, and he had already been in prison, so he's kind of getting around us.
How many of there were you?
There was at least 5 of us.
Okay.
So he has this Hearst, and we're out joyriding around and stuff like that, and we came upon a gas station late one night, and we went into the gas station, took some tires, and took some odds and ends out of there. And then somehow somebody snitched on us, and we ended up in jail. They all got out, and I didn't.
Why?
I don't know. I don't remember, because the guy that we rode with in this car, he had already been in the penitentiary.
Okay.
So the police needed somebody to say, and so all those people must have copped out on him. I went to jail for at least 3 months. I stayed in jail, and then a judge let me out on probation. I had a pretty good job, but I stole something on the job. I stole some money, and so I had a crazy girlfriend at the time. Her name was Mary, and she was a local hooker, and I hung out with her, and I think I uh, impregnated her. I didn't know that. And then the police got a hold of me, and I went before the same judge, and he was an old man, and he says, "You're going to jail." So he gave me
Prison this time.
Yeah, he gave me prison. He says, "I'm sentencing you consecutively 4 to 60 years."
4 to 60?
60 years.
In what penitentiary?
In a not as big a prison as the one in Ohio, but one in Mansfield, Ohio, that I saw them use on one of the, that became a set for a movie. I remember seeing it was a movie about, oh, I don't know, Green Mile. Green Mile was that penitentiary.
Okay.
Anyway, I stayed in that penitentiary, and I stayed there for 3 years.
You did.
I did 1 year out, 6 months out. I went to an honor farm in Sandusky, Ohio, and then I was paroled. My father didn't want me to be paroled. He wanted either to come and live with him or not go back to. So I went back to Cincinnati and got involved with a guy that was a little bit shaky. He wanted to sell marijuana, and I didn't want to really sell marijuana. So I decided to move west.
Okay, now before you moved west, in 1956, the poem by Allen Ginsberg came out, Howl.
Yeah.
Were you familiar with the poem when it
What
first
year?
came out? 56. You were 23 at the time. Were you familiar with the poem when it first came out?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea until I moved to San Francisco by way of going to Tucson, Arizona.
Okay.
That any of that stuff existed.
Okay, so how did you make the journey out west? What was the itinerary?
My friend, who I lived with in Cincinnati, was Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Jimmy Yee, and him and I hung around a rock and roll place by the name of Pinky's.
And this is
in
what?
Cincinnati.
This is what year?
57.
Okay, so when you say rock and roll, what do you mean by rock and roll? In 57, we had Elvis. We didn't have much rock and roll.
This was rhythm and blues.
Okay, rhythm and blues. Because of
The
British
saxophone,
invasion.
black saxophones.
Okay.
Playing dance music. They didn't realize the dance. They were still swinging.
Yeah.
High swinging dancing.
Right.
That's what was happening.
Okay. Was it a juke joint kind of
No, it
place?
was a regular nice bar that
Okay.
they converted.
So Jimmy Yee was working there?
Jimmy Yee was working there on the weekends, and I became friends with him, and I became his driver because he liked to drink on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
He was a machinist during the week,
Mm-hmm.
and then he lived to go to that rock and roll joint and become the bartender because he scored all kinds of women out of there. He was the bartender. He was good looking, and he was kind of he had been a boxer, so he could handle the bouncing there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what. So I hung out with him, and then I got married from there. I married. I was already married to Mary Hensley, who, when I was in prison, had a baby while I was in prison. She wrote me a letter, which I took a long time to get, and then when I got out, I went to see her. But I tried to make a home with her with the child, and she just wanted to did what she did. She wanted to be a hooker, and it was no cohesiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So I got hooked up with a girl that I went to work for her father, who was homosexual, and he owned one of those little restaurants that cater to people that work. you know, working man's restaurant that's open until maybe 2 o'clock. So she divorced. She helped me divorce Mary, and then she married me. We went to Indiana. You get married very easily in Indiana. So we went to Indiana. And we decided after maybe 4 or 5 months living together that Cincinnati wasn't a good place to live. I remember I had a friend that I hung out with, and I went out with him one night, and he took me to his girlfriend's house to get her or see her before we went out. And we went across the river to Kentucky, and somehow he was upset at me looking at his girlfriend. So when we came into the bar that he was in, there was a big fight, I remember, that was going on. And then after the fight, we went into the bar part, and he pulled a gun on me, and he actually shot me, but the thing didn't go off. He clicked it twice, and then somebody grabbed him and so forth. But he was going to shoot me. Is my friend. He was a used car salesman. So I said to my wife when I got home, I said, "We're leaving here. Let's get out of here. It's becoming crazy." You know, I didn't do anything with him. You know, so we sold all our stuff, gave back stuff that we had gotten from finance companies and stuff like that, and we took off and went to visit my father.
Did Jimmy E go with you?
No, by then Jimmy E is Jimmy E. I'm not dealing with Jimmy E yet. No, see, I left Jimmy E's house and got married to her, so we have our own place in a different part of the city.
But, right.
Yeah.
But you're still friends.
We're still friends. He's still doing what he does. I'm not his driver anymore. And we always had a car. She was a fluent person because her father had this restaurant and stuff, and she still worked for him. Okay, so anyway, we got ourselves together and went to Tucson, Arizona.
Now, why Tucson? Why did
my
you...
father lived there now. By now, he's living in Tucson. He owns his own restaurant. We thought that we could go to work for him there, but when we got there, he had a woman that stayed, that was his next door neighbor, and she was overseeing him. He was in a delicate age of, you know, not senility, but he drank a lot. So this woman was...
How old a man was he at the time?
He was in his 60s then. And so she couldn't go to work for him, and she was, by now Mary Jo was pregnant. And we had a little Thunderbird we came there in, one of those little 55 Thunderbirds.
Right, with the take off the top, the little portholes.
Right. And we had our own place, and she couldn't work for him. That woman wouldn't let her work. So I decided that I better get a job. So I tried construction. My father fixed it up.
You were on terms with your father.
I was on fairly good terms, and it was fading. So because of this woman, I think, or whatever, I never had a very good rapport with my father. I think in the 30s I did, but as he was always trying to oversee me, and he didn't understand our connection. So anyway, I went to a job in the hot sun as a hod carrier, mixing mud and stuff. I never made it. I didn't make it to to lunch. So I said to my wife, I think it's time for you to go home. So I think I took her home.
Back to Ohio.
Back to Ohio, and then came back there.
Why?
Something like that.
Why did you feel it was time for her
Well,
to go
because we weren't getting anywhere. So, I know what must have happened. See, the finance company came and took that car. We didn't own it.
home? Oh, they were repoed it.
So I think they repoed it, and so I had to send her home. That's how it happened. So I had to figure out whether to stay there or not. And I didn't like Tucson, Arizona very well. It was too hot for me. So I remembered Jimmy E. Now, Jimmy E. had just gotten married. What happened to Jimmy E. is a dancer came through Cincinnati, and somehow he met her through his parents, his parents had a Chinese restaurant in downtown Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow he met this young woman who was an exotic dancer. So he followed the exotic dancer thing that she was on. She had to visit different towns.
Circuit, you mean?
Circuit. And it got him out of being a mechanic, so he liked that. And then when he came back to Cincinnati, he married her, and she took him back to San Francisco. So I found that out.
Okay, so he arrives in San Francisco in about what year?
60, wait a minute, no, 58, 59.
58 or 59.
Yeah.
You'd been out of touch with him, but then you found out where he was?
Yeah.
And so you're in Tucson at the time.
I'm in Tucson, but I know where he is, and he sends me his address, and I take I get a job in a, what do they call this, theatrical restaurant, or, where they have shows, and I'm the busboy.
Mm-hmm.
So you get 63 cents an hour.
This is in Tucson.
This is in Tucson because they have a right to work state.
Mm-hmm.
You pay whatever they want.
Right.
And but I saved my tips, so I got enough money to get a bus ticket. I worked there for 3 weeks, and I remember there was a guy, there was a hypnotist or something a pickpocket. He knew how to pickpocket. So working in a place like that was, I liked it. I liked working in a theatrical place. So when I get to San Francisco, Kobe, Jimmy's new wife, says, "Listen, we found you a job. I'm just there off the bus,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
I had maybe $10 or $15 left. So anyway, I go to work for Bimbo's 365.
Okay, now where are they living at the
They are
time?
living in not Pacific Heights, but Lower Pacific Heights.
The ocean side.
All right, I'll tell you where they lived. They lived at Union and Buchanan.
Okay.
In San Francisco, that's a certain.
It's a district of some
yeah,
sort.
yeah. It's at this point it's middle class, but it became rich later.
Right.
So she had also a side business of making clothes for people, and she still was dancing in the Chinese places.
Now, is she Chinese herself?
She's Chinese too. Now,
Okay.
that's the point of her. He never in his life before her had a Chinese girlfriend or wife.
Uh-huh.
He always went with white women, and white women adored him.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good looking and so forth. So his main concern when he moved here is telling her he wanted his own bar, like he was working at Pinky's, right? He wanted his own, so he finally talked her into that, but that's later.
Okay, but before that, you're off the bus and she tells you you have a job,
at Bimbo's 365.
which is located where?
It's on, let me see, it's Columbus. Is it Columbus or Broadway?
Is it North Beach?
Yeah, but it's more down towards Power Records.
Okay. So it's a little west of North Beach.
Yeah. It's right where the trolley car comes down and then it lands.
That's Broadway, I think.
Yeah, no, it's not Broadway.
Isn't it?
It's Columbus.
It's Columbus.
Okay.
Okay, so what kind of place was Bimbo's? What would you describe
Bimbo's is owned by an Italian at the time, and his main thing is to have who was there when I was there, and it was only one star, was Lily St. Cyr, and her thing was a bubble dance. She was also an exotic dancer, and you never saw, she's a gorgeous woman, tall, she's almost 6 foot tall, and blonde, and she only took a bath in front of you, and she had a bubble in front of her, and she knew how to get out of that bathtub and not show you her body. That was her gig.
So he had a stage restaurant type of thing.
Yeah, and today Bimbo's is still going. It's rock and roll venue.
Okay, but at this time, it was a sit-down place where you could have a meal and watch the show.
That's right. It was one of those.
And it had a bar.
Yes, because they had waiters and there was a kitchen, and their main thing was a girl in some kind of a device where she went down in the basement and got on a table nude, and you saw her in some kind of a prism over the bar.
Now this is, of course, after Hugh Hefner started Playboy.
I don't think so. I think it's about the same
maybe
time.
around the same time, but
Yeah.
in the point being that this time in history, this type of thing is now starting to happen, right? What
Well-
were you doing there? What was
Well,
your job?
the truth of the matter is that after that, that's when North Beach became. Right before that became no, North Beach wasn't ready for any that dancing that they're doing today. It was all bars,
right, pool halls,
Mike's Pool Hall. I stayed at the Swiss American Hotel.
Right.
I stayed at the Columbia or Columbus Hotel, that was Chinese.
A lot of Italians there at the time.
But in the meantime, I'm working at different jobs all over the city. Worked at the Fairmount Hotel as a soda guy, and ice cream maker, and other jobs. And then I started to become waiter, and then I started to become bartender. And that's when Jimmy opened his place called the Dragon Lady with his wife's logo on the place, and I became his bartender.
And where was the Dragon Lady located?
It was on the corner of Broadway and what's the street? The street that has the tunnel. It goes down into San Francisco. I can't remember, but it was.
Was it with North Beach though?
It was in North Beach. And it was right across the street from a place that had that community singing, and sawdust on the floor and peanuts and stuff like that. It was right across the street. So both of these...
You mean people could go in and just sing songs?
Sing songs.
Like a karaoke type of thing.
Yeah, that's right. It was a karaoke bar. And it happened to be, later on, there was a place called Lemon something that was also a bar. And when I was with the Birds later on, I was right next door to this place. By now, the Dragon Lady was gone. That was later.
Okay, but the Dragon Lady, you stayed there working for how long?
All right. So when I met the Dragon Lady for about a year or 6 months, 6 months more, who used to come into the bar were people like Ferlinghetti, because the guys would hang out with each other what was Jack Kerouac.
Mm-hmm.
They used to
Neil Cassidy.
They used to visit bars in North Beach area, And that's what they would do. They would kind of go to one bar to the next bar and have a few drinks. And so I was a bartender sitting there, and they would come up there because they were kind of curious about the place. It became, the Dragon Lady became, let me see, not a karaoke bar, but a bar that, a piano bar.
Oh, okay. So they had musicians.
Yeah. And the highlight, there were two highlighted people there. One was this young girl, Letty Luce, who was from Macau, China, Hong Kong. And she was a singer, but she was a waitress. And she had big boobs, and she was really cute, and you know. And then the other one was Ralph Mathis, was Johnny's brother.
Okay, now Ralph Mathis looks like Johnny Mathis.
Yes, and sings like him.
Are they same age? Are they twins?
They were almost twins. They might have been twins. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. All I know is Ralph could go to Asia and they'd never know the difference.
But he was actually had a gig at the Dragon Lady.
At this place, yeah. Had a regular gig.
But at the same time, his brother has already made it in the industry.
Yeah, he's making it. His brother is making it.
Okay.
Yeah, really hard.
Right.
So he's a secondary player, and he takes this job. He played piano good, and he really sang good. It's the same as his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a lot of clientele that came in there, and it was a dark bar.
What kind of people came in? Were they working
Chinese,
class people?
but
Were
see,
they middle class?
What Jimmy was, Jimmy liked white people. He wanted to be involved with anybody. And his wife had that leaning too, because she's a person that went around the country, and so that's why they opened. And there was another bar in Chinatown at the time that they kind of comped off of. It was a very tiny bar, and you went there and you could hardly get in and out because it was so busy. But it was mysterious because it was in an alley.
Uh-huh.
See? So at the same time, I would go out with them and have my meals. Most of my meals were in Chinese restaurants at the time, because at that time you could get a decent meal for 75 cents. So
and they knew all the restaurants to go to.
They knew all the restaurants to go, and they took me, and I would, in my own time, I would go there.
And so what kind of clientele did the Dragon Lady have? Was it an
young
up-and-coming...
people.
young
people that like to drink.
That drink, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, so how long did you last there?
I didn't last there for 6 months. I had a huge fight. I started to have a situation with Letty Luce. She was engaged to a guy in Stan Kenton's band, who was a famous...
Very famous.
Jazz band,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a saxophonist, and she saw him on rare occasions because he traveled.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a singer, and she wanted to be in music, so she would ask me to take her home because she lived in the district that's Haight-Ashbury, and we're talking about Broadway, right?
Right.
So you had to go quite a distance, so I would take her home. So I got involved with her because she was a horny chick and so forth. I needed it too. So I had a thing going with her, and I went over the top. I started to think of her as, you know. So one of the guys that sang in one of the bars sent some guys in one night with himself. He brought these guys in, and they were going to kick my ass.
For what reason?
Stay away from Letty, I guess. So,
Okay.
So
What, were they like a Chinese mafia or
they
something?
were just young Chinese guys.
I see.
So I'm a kick-ass dude, and I threw them all out. I beat them up, and that was the end of my job there. Whatever they irked me about, I don't know what it was. but I'm not going to take it from you guys out of here, and they wouldn't go, so I took them out and threw them out.
And then when you would explain this to your friend,
No, his wife said, and see, they had a partner too, a Chinese woman. And the woman says, see, Jimmy knew me. He knew what would happen, what I could do in this bar. He used me as his bouncer. And so he couldn't save me. So I was.
but you didn't lose your friendship with him.
No, I didn't lose my friendship with him. But it was time for me to go, and I had to get another job, so I did. I very easily found another job.
And where was this other job?
The other job was in a place called Nave, San Francisco, opened on Bush Street, about three blocks past Polk, and it was a famous place that was turned into a big jazz club because this guy was the owner was a big jazz nut, but he was a multi-millionaire, and his family was the DuPonts, from the DuPont. He was actually a DuPont child. See, so he had a lot of money. So he owned two jazz places, one in Palo Alto, and one in San Francisco. And the San Francisco one, the venue was anybody in jazz. So he had Count Basie, he had Lionel Hampton, anybody that
Duke.
Duke Ellington, Jackie
Coltrane.
and Roy. No, Coltrane. That was a different story. That was a different story altogether. Coltrane was in North Beach. You wanted to see Coltrane, you went to the Jazz Workshop. If you want to see Miles Davis, you went downtown. No, this was a little bad. Those guys were in some kind of another venue. He only had big bands, and he had a tap dancer, he had a jazz tap dancer. He had, what was her name? Lambert Hendrickson Ross. He had black singer, what's her name? She's the famous woman singer. Anyway.
Not Lena Horne.
No.
Not Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan,
No.
Dinah Washington, none of those.
No. She's a heavy woman, and she had really beautiful voice. But I can't remember her name. It'll come back to me, I think.
So he had various. Was
He
this
had
a
a
7
lot
day a
of
week?
I worked there. I was the spare bartender, and I became the regular bartender because somebody didn't show up or whatever, and I just became a regular bartender, and I worked there 6 months. I worked there long enough to go through the itinerary. You see, so I got to hear all that jazz and be involved with it. And when you deal with musicians, you got to deal with musicians to selling them booze too. So, but to hear all that stuff every night, night after night, that was really left a mark in my head.
And this was what, around 59?
No, this is later. This is 60 now.
60 now.
59, 60. Yeah.
59, 60.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're
And at the
27
same
years
time,
old.
You see, Letty Luce was singing, and she had high venue, so we could visit what's his name's other club, the outside at the inside in Palo Alto, and that's where I met. That's ridiculous. I almost have it. The man, he was a rhymer. You might, Lord Buckley.
Lord Buckley, Petition the Lord for Prayer, the Naz.
Yes. I met Lord Buckley there. Later on, I met Lord Buckley going home to Cincinnati. I just saw Lord Buckley a week before he was killed in New York.
But how was he killed?
Police did something to him in New York City.
Really?
I don't remember the whole story, but it had to do with the police. They didn't want him to work, and they didn't like what he said. And,
Well,
which
he was
a lot of bars.
he was very famous in the late 50s.
Yeah. Well, that's when I knew him, and
He was
I
one of
met
the
him.
first rappers.
Yeah, I met him through Lori, through the singer, the woman singer. I met him through her because he was in the dressing room, and she would sing, and he was on next.
And what did you think of him? Did you form a
I
relationship?
thought he was fantastic.
Did you form a relationship with
Couldn't
him?
stop listening to what he had to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only records today I don't have is of Lord Buckley. Lord Buckley's stuff is priceless.
Mm-hmm. And what did you find so interesting or so different about Lord Buckley?
The way he treated you. He treated everybody that he liked. He called them prince or princess. And, you know, he made you feel you were part of him. He was a down-home guy, and so was his family. And
He had a bass player also behind it, didn't he?
I don't remember that.
I think
All
he
I know is that he lived in Sausalito, and later on Vito came and lived in Sausalito. In fact, Vito almost lived in became an entity in Sausalito because he had a friend that found him a house and a business. But somehow a guy by the name of Bob Amanzati, a wandering Jew, said to him, "Try Kotati."
All right, we'll get to that later. Let me ask you now, though. So you eventually ended up in Redwood City, too, didn't you? Didn't you work in Redwood City?
I worked in Redwood City, but this is before. This thing continues, where I had different jobs after that, and then I had a friend. His name was George DeFore, or George De Quattro. De Quattro in Italian is four, and he was a jazz piano player, and I would go with him to Redwood City, and he would play at some bars. So now I got to know some of the people that lived there, and decided that it would be a pretty good place to live. And then I met this guy. His name was Feinstein. I'll get it. Anyway, he had a catering business. Did I say Feinstein? Weinstein.
Weinstein.
He had a catering business, and he had a couple of trucks. And he told me one of my delivery guys is fucking up on me, and I think he's trying to steal my business. So he said, "Will you drive one of the trucks?" So I did. And I also found that there was really a nice rock and roll joint up there. They were doing the Twist at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Peppermint Lounge or something up there, and it was on the border of Redwood City and not Palo Alto, but the town in between.
Burlingame?
No. Not Palo Alto, not South Palo Alto. I don't remember. I don't remember, but I did meet a girl from there. Anyway, so I had a house there. I rented a house with my brother.
Oh, okay.
In Redwood City. I had a lot of girlfriends. I didn't know how to dance, but I was really intrigued with the twist, but I never could twist.
Mm-hmm.
I just would watch. And it was one of those kind of places you could go in and get familiar with women and stuff like that. So I had a job, and I had a house, and I didn't stay there too long, but I did go on a trip to L.A. with my brother John and a girlfriend that I had at the time.
For what reason?
To check out Los Angeles.
In other words, you were thinking that maybe you would like to move there?
Yeah, and at the same time, George DeFore was getting a job in L.A. as a he was selling a product through the mail called the Pump.
Right. Now, why don't you explain? This is the penis enlarger,
This is
isn't
a
it?
penis enlarger. It's done with it's done with centrifugal force, where you force air into it, and it's a jerk-off machine, really.
Now, tell me how he got involved in it. What year? What are we talking?
The guys that were involved with there, who I considered the Jewish mafia, they could deal with lists. They could find lists from throughout the United States of people that bought products like that. They put ads in magazines and stuff like that. So
And these
anything
lists,
exotic.
and these type of lists were.
This was all
taboo at the
Yeah,
time.
but there was no dildos.
Right.
There was no
None of
porno.
sex,
There was
no
no
sex.
porno yet.
Yeah.
No porno.
No sex toys.
No sex toys.
So he gets a hold of this group of people, and they say, "Hey, look, why don't you come on board and help sell this thing?"
Yeah, he's talking to George, and George is interested because they're giving him like 25% to do this thing, and he found an apartment, and he got a business together and somewhere where he could package the stuff and send it.
So he was already based down there, George.
George was, but he was also playing in small places, jazz places
in L.A.
in L.A. I remember there was one. That's another one that could be on that list. It was right across the street from Schwab's. There was a little bar right there, and I don't remember the name of it. Anyway, I know he played there, and so did a lot of
piano bar.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember a lot of really good musicians played there. See, but I knew he played there. He liked to do that. Anyway, so I was intrigued by Hollywood. So I take my brother and my girlfriend, and we go down and stayed on Franklin for a month in an apartment. This was around Franklin and Gower.
Okay, you were down near Western area, yeah.
Yeah.
Street before Western.
Yeah, somewhere like that.
Under the Hollywood sign area.
Well, no.
Not up in the hills.
No, we weren't that far down down Franklin. We were more nearer Vine Street.
It's blinking.
It is.
What does that mean?
We got to change the.
Should I hit record off?
Yeah,
Hit
turn it
record.
off.